send shivers down my spine. I'm surrounded by your supernova, blinding me so bright. Only you can bleed me out without making any sound. I can feel this power building up, nothing can stop you now. I feel the rush. Do you feel it come true? You make me feel so alive. I lose it all for you. Here comes the rush. Connected energy. Why'd you have to be so perfect? How'd you only affect me? I know that I'm ready now. Bring the wave to take me down. So beautiful, building up, nothing can stop you now. I feel the rush. Do you feel it come true? You make me feel so alive. I lose it all for you. Here comes the rush. Here comes the rush. Here comes the rush. When the girls come by in the middle of the night, you gotta break some rules if you wanna be cool. When the girls come by, gonna lose your mind. Is the grown alright?
Good morning. I would like to welcome you all to this general meeting of shareholders of Adyen NV. We are very pleased to host this general meeting for you in person together with the Management Board and the Supervisory Board. I would like to briefly introduce the Management Board and Supervisory Board to you. The Management Board currently consists of 6 members: Pieter van der Does, the CEO, our Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Adyen; Ingo Uitenhage, our CFO, Chief Financial Officer; Roeland Prins, our CCO, the Chief Commercial Officer; Mariette Zwart, the CLCO, the Chief Legal and Compliance Officer; Mariette's here behind me; Kamran Zaki, our COO, the Chief Operating Officer; and finally, Alexander Mattei, our CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. Pieter, Ingo, Mariette, and Roeland are pleased to join me here today. Our Supervisory Board currently consists of 5 members. My name is Piero Overmars. I am the Chairman of the Supervisory Board. We have Delphine Rueda, the Chairman of the Audit and Risk Committee; Joep van Beurden, the Chairman of the Nomination and Remuneration Committee; Pamela Joseph, and Kiva Kyogen. Delphine was going to be here today, but he sent me a message. He tested positive, so unfortunately he can't be here. But I'm happy that Joep is here with me today. Before we start this general meeting, I have a number of announcements and requests to make. I would kindly ask you to set your mobile phone, laptops, tablets or other media carriers to silent mode. This meeting will be held in English we are an international company with English spoken as our corporate language. This meeting will be audio recorded. Records shall be published on the company's website. There will be various moments where you will be given the opportunity to ask questions. For the sake of an orderly meeting, I would ask you to limit this to a maximum of 2 questions per person. In case you have more questions, then we will come back to you after we've allowed others to ask questions as well. I hereby state that this shareholders' meeting has been convened in accordance with the company's Articles of Association. The agenda, the explanatory notes to the agenda, and corresponding documentation were all made available on our website within the prescribed time. Therefore, I conclude that the convening of this shareholders' meeting has taken place in a legally valid manner. I am pleased to appoint Brigitte van der Bos as Secretary of the meeting. The minutes of the meeting will be drawn up as an official report by Mark-Jan Arends, our civil law notary at Clifford Chance. The minutes will be published on our website no later than 3 months after this general meeting. Apart from during the meeting, it was also possible to cast votes electronically from the registration date up to and including the 25th of May 2022 by 1700 hours CEST, and I refer you to the convening notice documentation for the exact details. The exact percentage of shares represented here, as well as the number of votes that are validly represented, will now be announced by the civil law notary. Mark-Jan.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I can confirm that there are 23,666,659 votes validly represented in this meeting, and for your information, this represents 76.42% of the total issued share capital of Adyen. And these totals include the votes that were cast electronically. This means that valid resolutions can be taken for the agenda items that are being put forward, and I will give the floor back to the Chairman.
Thank you, Mark-Jan. This brings the opening of the meeting to a close, and we will now proceed with agenda item number 2. The annual report, Management Board remuneration, Supervisory Board remuneration, adoption of the annual accounts, dividend policy, reservation of profits. We now come to the agenda item 2A, where the Management Board, Supervisory Board and external auditor will present their reports for the past year. After the presentation of the Management Board, I will elaborate on the report of the Supervisory Board. Thereafter, our external auditor, Rogier van Adrichem of PwC, will give an account of the 2021 audit in which PwC performed the audit of the company. After these presentations, you will have the opportunity to submit questions to the Management Board, the Supervisory Board and the external auditor. And I will start by giving the floor to Pieter van der Does, CEO of the company, and Ingo Uythagen, our CFO, for the report of the Management Board 2021. Pieter.
Thank you, Piero. Let's start with the purpose of the company, our mission, and those are 3 points, and those 3 points haven't changed since our foundation, and that is, we're here to change the payments industry. We help our merchants to grow, and thirdly, we are having fun whilst doing it. Why those 3 points? Changing the payment industry, we do approach things differently, and I'll show you later how we, for example, have set ourselves up to do everything in one platform. Helping our merchants to grow. Why is that important? That gives direction to all the things that we do around maximizing authorizations, but also if you look at the new services that we offer, all the things that merchants need to be successful in their business. Merchants, there's a choice there. We do that because we focus solely on our clients. So for example, we often get the question, what about consumer products? If we say no, we are a B2B company, we focus on our merchants. Having fun whilst doing it. Why is that relevant? That means not having a beer after work, but it means that we want to create an environment in which talented people enjoy working and are having fun doing that. Here you see an example of the Adyen approach. And what you see here is that different parts in the industry, which were usually done separately, like a gateway, like a risk management system, acquiring platform, that we do that all in one. And the power of that is that it outperforms how things were done in the industry. This philosophy doesn't only relate to how we have built our platform, it, for example, also relates to, for example, doing acquisitions. We are very reluctant to do that because we are careful about the balance of the number of engineers that are working on innovation and that balance between engineers that are working on integration and maintenance. So we feel this is the most effective way to bring innovation to our merchants. Then I'd like to say something about the business, the highlights of 2021. What we have seen is that our licenses were first strongest in Europe, and because of that, of course, also the core of our client base was doing transactions with us in Europe. But as the company progresses, that balance changes, and therefore last year was the first year where more than 40% of net revenues came outside of Europe. So that's new. We also invest in our teams and on scaling the culture. What that means is we had the core of our engineering in Amsterdam, also of course hubs in Brazil and in San Francisco. But what we now did is we opened 2 other locations, one in Madrid and one in Chicago. We sent our culture carriers there, and they are now successfully recruiting talented engineers there. Also, we organized ourselves in pillars and in solutions. So that's the way how we structure the company, and that means that we give more people the opportunity to develop themselves as managers. So that's also a way for us to scale the company. Thirdly, I'd like to talk about innovation. We have been always a customer-led organization, and we continue to listen very carefully to our customers. Especially platforms have become a dominant development for Adyen. This is how we see it. We sign up small and mid-sized merchants, so we invest a lot there. And from the beginning of the company, a large part of our growth has been from our existing merchants, more than 80%. So we continue to listen to them and build what they need to develop their businesses. I'd like to move to the next slide. As Adyen grows as a company, our approach to social and environmental responsibilities, of course, increased too. And throughout 21, this became evident in scaling and build out our import product suite. So that's about impact, about sustainability, and our DEI efforts. And we are expanding our reporting frameworks. We are a type of company that we do things first and then tell the impact of that later. So I'm expecting more to be able to report more on this in the future. But already today we can talk about a few things. I will give an overview of what we do on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Ingo will talk about social responsibility and how we are expanding on our ESG reporting efforts. On diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Adyen formula already says we include different people to sharpen our ideas. So it's very much into our system, and from the beginning we have been wanting to make a very build diverse teams. But we have done DEI surveys, and we have been stepping up in efforts to make sure that we don't overlook things. When it comes to building our teams, we know that inclusion is not just something that happens by itself. So we are further building, and we're iterating to make that stronger. And let me know the most important outcomes of our DEI policy in 2021. We have hosted a number of trainings. Of course, we already did trainings around unconscious biases, but we stepped up and we now do specific trainings for team leads, on how to build diverse teams, and also with managers, senior managers, we have done deep dives on building and managing diverse teams. And we have made a few commitments, and the commitments are: we are committed to hire, promote, and enable underrepresented groups across all the levels of the organization, and we have committed to increase the gender balance of our management board and senior management to be at least one-third, to have at least one-third female members. We've seen the gender balance in the company, both overall and both in senior management, move to 36%. That's a significant increase, especially in senior managers, where we were only at 29%. So we are happy to see progress as a result of our efforts. I'd like to hand over to you, Ingo.
Thanks, Peter. I want to take you through our social responsibility. Thanks, Peter. I want to take you through the social responsibility efforts that we have taken in 2021. And from the start, we have always focused on building Adyen for the long term. So building this sustainable company is basically at the heart of our company, how everyone works together. And currently, if you look at the efforts that we have, it's built around three pillars. The first one is our technology. We're most proud of our technology. How can we use our technology to help merchants to do the right sustainable efforts? It's about local initiatives, so how can we help our teams to make an impact on communities where they operate, so the cities where we are active as a company, over 20 cities globally. And the third one, of course, the impact on our environment. And in all our efforts, we take the Sustainable Development Goals as a starting point. To start with our technology, if you look at our technology, we've basically developed two products. The first product is Giving, and the second product is Restore. And Giving is a product that we launched a couple of years ago, and I think we're quite proud that in 2021, this was the first year where we saw real traction in our product. So what is this product about? So we help our merchants to make donations to charities very easy. So in the checkout, whether that's online or offline, they have the ability to make a donation. So their shoppers have the ability to make a donation to a charity of choice of the merchant. And we then make sure that all the full donation goes to the charity. We take the payment fees as a cost, and therefore we support the charities in the best way we can. Merchants like H&M and Etsy have been using this, and in 2021, volumes in this product multiplied by 10. So I think that's quite impactful. You really see the traction now. They see the impact of it, and we're supporting 50 charities now on a global scale. We have, of course, a lot of ambitions for this year, but we're very happy with the traction. The Restore product is a slightly different product where we help merchants to facilitate basically the emissions that are linked to a product when they sell a product. And consumers can then basically pay for these emissions to compensate. This product was launched in 2021. It's still early days for this product. It typically takes a couple of years to really build it. So we're taking feedback from merchants right now, and we hope that in the next years this product will be as significant as the Giving product. Then on our environmental footprint, I think it's very important to say that we are focused on this. At the same time, it's of course our license to operate. If you look at our total emissions compared to some other streets, is relatively limited. We calculate our greenhouse gas emissions for scope 1, 2, and 3, and have invested since the start of the company to compensate for our emissions. And of course, we're working with a working group internally to see how we can further reduce. Most of those efforts are around traveling, because traveling is our main area where we still have the highest level of emissions. And we work with the team to see like what can we do to further reduce those emissions and at the same time be effective as a team working together and seeing each other. Other areas where we work on is, of course, terminal recycling, so the point-of-sale terminals, getting all our data centers to green energy, making sure that our business offices also are running on green energy. Then the third part is local initiatives, and I think this is where a lot of people in our staff are most proud of, that they work with local initiatives in the city where we are active. A lot of grassroots initiatives pop up here. It's always linked to one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. That's something that we're really proud of. And we see very different initiatives popping up. So in California, we're helping with school supplies. In Paris, we're helping to serve over 1,500 meals every day to homeless people in Paris. And I think we're most proud of that. These are all initiatives that are taken by the team, and they spend a lot of time to make sure that it further builds out. Peter already said something about that we always first focus on doing and then reporting. Well, that's also on ESG side. In 2021, though, we have stepped up in our reporting efforts. We published a report in the summer of 2021, which is the Adyen way of building an ethical business, where we more clearly explain what we do. 3 topics are covered in that report: how we deal with people and culture, our social and environmental responsibility, and our responsible governance, risk and compliance efforts. And we further build on this report in our annual report this year, where we try to disclose as much as we can according to the GRI framework, and that's what we will continue to do. So before I go into the financials, I think it's very important that the whole team is very much committed to make sure that we take the right efforts to build an ethical and sustainable business. It's deeply, I think, in our culture, and we will continue to focus on making the right decisions and make sure that we stay close to what we think is important. Then on the financials, well, 2021 was a year of significant growth. In processed volume, we grew over 70%, in revenues over 46%, and in EBITDA 57%. So why is processed volumes growing faster than our net revenues? That's because we typically work with enterprise merchants that have pricing schedules that if you bring more volume to our platform, your price per transaction goes down. So bringing additional volume will lead to lower pricing, and therefore volume grows faster than our net revenues. It's part of our strategy since the start, and we think this is a healthy development. Net revenues were, for the first time in the history of the company, over 1 billion. Of course, something we're quite proud of to get to this important mark, and at the same time processed volume was over 500 billion, which also I think a very important milestone in the history of the company. Then Peter already referred to this. We become more and more a global company, where we started off in Europe when we launched the company. Now over 40% of our revenues is realized outside of Europe. And of course that I think is a very strong proof point that we're becoming more and more a global company. Specifically, our operations in the US have a lot of traction, not just the e-commerce activities, but also the physical point of sale transactions. Of physical point of sale, we currently at 30% of our volume. And if you realize that this is a domain that we only started a couple of years ago, and volumes have doubled over the last year, I think it's very clear that this is a area where we have a lot of traction. Our costs were up 31%. That's also why you see, of course, EBITDA margin further expanding. CapEx were 5% of net revenues, exactly in line with our guidance. And part of those investments were in our new offices here in Amsterdam. Also here we want to make sure that we continue to invest in attractive office locations around the world, because we strongly believe that working together in our office leads to better results. Total equity increased from 1.2 billion to 1.8 billion in 2021. So I think you see that we have a very solid financial profile, and that's also underpinned by our rating that we got since the end of last year by S&P. Our public rating from S&P is now A-. I think I come to an end right now. This was my presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Peter and Ingo, for the presentations. As the Supervisory Board, we would like to give a brief explanation of our report. We have a clear duty from the point of view of regulations and articles of association in which supervision of the Management Board is paramount. For that purpose, we have set up an Audit and Risk Committee and a Nomination and Remuneration Committee. The Audit and Risk Committee discusses the financial results of the company, the reporting procedures, the risk and control systems, regulations and compliance. It also keeps in close contact with the external auditor and internal audit function. The external auditor focuses, among other things, on the inspection and audit of the annual accounts. The internal audit focuses on identifying possible areas for improvement in the organization from a reporting and control perspective. The Nomination and Remuneration Committee looks at topics such as culture, remuneration policy, recruiting initiatives, and succession of members of the Management Board and the Supervisory Board. I would like to inform you about the activities of the Supervisory Board in 2021. This has been discussed at length in the Supervisory Board report in the annual report, so I will not discuss this in its entirety, but would like to explain a number of elements here. As a Supervisory Board, we are tasked with supervising the conduct and policies of the Management Board. We are guided by the interest of Adyen and its operations, taking into consideration the interests of Adyen stakeholders, and it's focused on long-term value creation, as is implemented in Adyen's strategy and culture. The profile of the Supervisory Board is such that it is capable of assessing the broad outline of the overall policy of Adyen and its most important risks incurred. The composition of the Supervisory Board is such that the members are able to act critically and independently of one another, the Management Board and/or any other interest. It further allows for the carrying out of all Supervisory Board tasks, including staffing of committees. In 2021, the Supervisory Board convened for 8 meetings, of which 2 were held at the offices of Adyen and 6 were held via video conferencing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The attendance rate of Joep van Beurden, Delphine, Rueda, Kiva, Kyogen and myself was 100% in 21. Pamela Joseph was absent at 1 Supervisory Board meeting, therefore resulting in an attendance rate of 87.5. The Nomination and Remuneration Committee convened twice, and all committee members attended both meetings. The Audit and Risk Committee convened for 4 meetings in 21, and all committee members, including the internal auditor and external auditor, attended all meetings. During the meetings, the Supervisory Board engaged in discussions about, amongst other things, risk management, business performance, strategic updates, development of financials, diversity, culture, social responsibility, sustainability, compliance with relevant legislation, relations with regulators and remuneration were also discussed at length. Furthermore, deep dive sessions on specific topics with relevance to Adyen's business were held, such as IT security, privacy, PSP and bank, brand positioning, compliance and regulatory complexity. In short, these were some elements of the Supervisory Board's activities in 21. And this brings us to the conclusion of the Supervisory Board report. We will now address some questions that have been previously sent in by the VEB. Maybe Ingo, you can take the first ones, and then Peter after that.
Sure. Thank you, Piero. Sure. So the first question of the VEB was related to our expansion into embedded financial products, with the question like if we would launch such products like capital, would that increase our risk profile over time? Well, I think that's a good question. We share the risk with the platforms that we work with. So the capital product that we're launching is typically for platforms, and we have deals with those platforms that we share the risk. So we're not in a position that we like to, for instance, provide capital to our enterprise merchants. It's really about making sure that we help platforms to provide credit to sellers. And the split, how we exactly divide that risk depends per contract. And we strongly believe that we've built technology to understand, because we see the payment processing, how much risk we can take on a seller. So we have a lot of data points to make that assessment, and therefore we feel that the risk that we add to our platform is relatively limited. Then the second question is related to the growth of our large enterprise customers. Typically, this has an impact on our take rate because, also like we presented, if we work with large enterprise merchants, the take rate goes down. We have more growth in our processed volume compared to net revenues. And the question from VEB was like, will those new value-added services lead to higher take rates over time? And what is that time frame? Well, most of the services that we're launching is not really related to volume. We will report separately on the traction of those products once they become significant. So we're not steering to increase take rate per se. We want to make sure that those products are successful, and we will report on them separately. The third question is around our expansion into the mid-market and SME segment. And of course, there are more competitors active in that segment. The question is, to what degree could the move towards these segments result in higher or increased marketing, sales, and servicing expenses? Or will that be muted given the fact that Adyen is going after these merchants through platforms? Well, I think it's indeed the latter. We continue to focus on working with platforms to address the mid-market and SME segment. And that makes us a unique player in this space. We will do that in a very scalable way, so working closely with platforms and not directly marketing to SMEs. So it's not expected that we will significantly increase our marketing spend here. And then the final question of VEB was around the volume growth. So 80% of our volume growth is coming from existing merchants. And the question was, do we see a slowdown in growth this year? Well, this has been a consistent trend. Also in 2021, we haven't seen a slowdown so far. So no changes in that development. Yeah, these were the 4 questions that I would address. I think over to Peter.
Yeah, okay, please.
So the question is Adyen still able to both attract and retain key talent in today's tight Dutch and international labor market? Well, let's start with, it's no secret that it's not always so easy to hire talent, but we are very well positioned. It's because of our name, our brand name, but also our name as a culture-first company where people like to work. What we have seen is that some companies see a lot of people leaving after the pandemic, and for us that has been very limited. And especially if you look at regretted losses, that number is very low, below 3%. So we're doing quite well there. Question 2. Adyen in particular has seen growth acceleration in the United States. Is Adyen able to hire enough qualified people to keep up with the pace of expansion? We've been investing in the US team across all our offices, also with a new engineering office in Chicago, and we see that we can build a team that we can build out a team and that we have enough people to service all the new merchants that we have. Our second largest office is in San Francisco. It has 199 colleagues at the end of 2001, and we have offices in New York, Chicago, and Boston. So that's we are investing, and we always would like to hire more, but it's definitely enough to support the business.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I now invite you to submit any questions that you may have. Mr. Gaillard, if I pronounce it correctly.
Yes, you did. Dear Mr. Chairman, my name is Gillian Gaillard. I represent PGM and some of the UMedium participants, including APG, today at this annual general meeting. I actually have 3 questions, but I'll start with 2. My first question, Adyen has identified 4 areas for which emission reduction is possible: terminal recycling, data centers, new offices, and travel. Adyen does not specify the amount of emission reduction from these 4 areas. Could you elaborate on the targets for emission reduction for those areas? Also, whether there's specific targets for this year, 2022, and what Adyen's plans are for verifying your climate-related targets. Second question is about diversity and inclusion. So we also saw in the management board presentation, and we read in the annual report, that in 2020 the DEI working group started. There has been made progress in 2021. What concrete milestones were reached in 2021 to promote DEI? And we already saw a milestone related to gender. So I'm curious whether there are other milestones that have been reached. So that were my 2 questions for now.
Okay, thank you. For now, I guess, Ingo, you will take the first one, Peter, the second question.
Yeah, sure. So on the emissions, we don't have set specific targets for 2022, also because the total emissions is relatively limited. If you look at what we emit as a company, it's not where we make the main difference. What we want to focus on is on how we can bring positive impact to society. That's why we have set a different type of targets, which is we want to help with 1% of our net revenues contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals. So over 2022, we will spend 1% of our net revenues to those goals. And of course, we will further look into the emission targets. But as we said, like mostly it's related to travel, and we want to make sure that we find the right balance between, at the one hand, traveling and seeing each other and building a successful company. At the other hand, making sure that it happens in a responsible way. So one of the things that we have launched in 2021 is the responsible travel principles, like the questions that people should ask themselves before they start traveling. And these are our main efforts at the moment.
All right.
I'll take the question on DEI. Your question was regarding are there specific milestones? We do each year a DEI survey, and we committed ourselves to making improvement, so making sure we move into the right direction. If you look at last year, it's easy to report that on gender. There you see that we're moving into the right direction. But if you look at all the efforts that we have done, they are more difficult to quantify, but we have programs for less privileged people, and we have a number of those people that we hired and brought into the company, which is not always related to gender or color of skin. We have done initiatives for specific minorities. So, for example, being at events like Black in Tech and recruited people there. In the US, it's quite normal to report on specific ethnic backgrounds. For a global company like we are, that's not even legal. So we don't do that, but of course we do take it into account, and we're moving to diversity way beyond what you can see on the picture. But to be truly diverse, it's also very much into our DNA. We have built this company with different people, with different backgrounds. It's in the Adyen formula. We want to have those different opinions, and we continuously train ourselves to be open-minded and to understand that some people present themselves in a different way, have a different cultural background. But the short answer is we keep on measuring progress through the survey each year to make sure that we're moving into the right direction. And as long as we do that, we won't set hard targets.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gaillard, for your questions. Mr. van der Linden.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Erik van Buren. I'm speaking on behalf
excuse
of VBDO. I have two questions. One question is regarding the recently adopted EU directive regarding due diligence in the supply chain, which requires certain companies to address human rights issues and their impact on their own supply chain. And the VBDO is concerned if Adyen is able to comply with this directive, and would like to know which actions are being taken to comply, and even to comply beyond the necessary actions to improve the labor situations in the supply chain. That's my first question. The second question, first of all, the VBDO would like to compliment Adyen with the Speak Up initiative, which has been started this year, which goes beyond the whistleblower policy, which has been introduced in 2018. The VBDO would like to know if you are aware of the progress you have made in that field, and in which extent you know how you have improved, and how you are planning to develop that into the future.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Peter, you'll take the first one on the supply chain human rights directive, or Mariette, is that something you would like to take? And maybe you can also take the second one on the Speak Up tool.
Thank you for those questions. To start with the first on the new directive, while I believe that the directive is still in the proposal phase, awaiting formal approval from Council, I'm happy to conclude that we've already implemented most of the requirements, and we've done that, for instance, by amending our third-party policy, now setting much higher standards to our partners and our suppliers. As part of that, for instance, we look whether they adhere to international standards of human rights, and in particular we check whether there's any suspicion that they indeed make use of any slave or child labor. We reassess our partners and our suppliers on a reoccurring basis, and now we assess the risks to be low, also mainly because they do not produce any products or any goods. They're mainly just like we are, technical service provider, but we will continue to do that. On your second question on Speak Up, important topic indeed. I think as Peter already mentioned, we very much believe that our strong company culture helps us to identify and mitigate any integrity risks. Drivers to that culture, for instance, the Adyen formula, give a really clear direction to our employees, namely that we do not accept any integrity risks, and our governance and our control measures are all aligned in that direction. When you speak about unethical behavior in particular, we continue to invest in measures that really help us to create a safe environment for all of our employees in all of the regions. And for instance, what we do is, last year we've hosted discussion groups, trainings, we educate our team leads, but I think most important, we make sure that there are multiple ways in which people can really stand up and speak up and address any concerns. And the latest indeed being the Speak Up tool that allows employees to report any concerns anonymously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and if I may add to that last point, the anonymous messages, they will end up in my private email account, so they can send me an anonymous message, and I can also respond while the sender remains anonymous. So I think we've gone really as far as you can go to try to facilitate that process. Okay, are there any other questions of the shareholders so far? Do you want to ask your third question, Mr. Gaillard?
Yeah. Thanks. So my question actually is kind of a follow-up question of the previous question. Last year we asked Adyen to report on incidents, including code of conduct violations, for example, and what actions were taken. The 2021 annual report doesn't include an overview of incidents. So I was wondering what incidents took place in 2021 and how many have been resolved.
Mariette?
Yeah, I'll take this one. We still maintain a register for the reporting of any integrity or whistleblower incidents, in line with the whistleblower policy that you can find on our website.
Yeah.
And I can confirm that since last AGM, there are no reportable incidents.
All right. And are those incidents across all different categories, such as unacceptable behavior, but also power abuse, and those kind of categories are included?
Indeed, all
All right.
integrity-related incidents.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, what we would like to urge you to report a little bit more elaborate about whether there have been incidents, and if so, what kind of categories, how many incidents, and whether they're resolved, because that's information that's really important for us shareholders to know about the culture at Adyen. Right now, it's hard to get those insights because it's not included. And even though if there are no incidents, I think it's a good thing to actually show that there indeed have not been incidents. So that's some feedback that I wanted to give you. Thanks. Those were my questions.
Thank you. And to on that point, the fact that there are no incidents, you also have to ask yourself, why are there no reports? Have we made it easy enough as a company to report it? And as Mariette has explained all the measures that we've taken, we think that that's the case. So
Yeah.
I
But
wanted
you could also ask yourself, doesn't it say something that there are 0 incidents? Are there things that do happen but aren't reported? Yeah, I can't judge it, of course, but it's something to
that is
consider.
exactly my point. Because
All right,
so that's
yeah.
the question you ask yourself,
Yeah.
when there are no incidents reported.
Exactly.
So
What does that
does
mean?
that mean everything is fine, or does
Yeah.
it mean that people don't report?
Yeah.
So therefore you have to make it as easy as possible
Definitely.
to report and create a safe environment that people
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
thank you for your question.
good. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, shareholders. I'm happy to provide you with some insights into our audit of the Adyen's 2021 financial statements. And actually similar to 2020, the Adyen's financial year 2021 was characterized by the impact of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, but also by the continuous growth of processed volume, revenue, and net income. But before I explain our key audit matters, the materiality and the scope we applied, let me just start with the outcome of the audit. So we issued on the 9th of March an unqualified auditor's opinion on the consolidated financial statements. Well, like I said, in the year 2020, the global pandemic required our team and the employees of Adyen to work primarily from home. And therefore, we considered the impact of the pandemic on our audit approach, including our scoping, materiality, and our risk assessment. We assessed the impact on management accounting estimates and judgments, including future business and cash flow projections underpinning the valuation of certain assets. We reviewed the impact on Adyen's internal controls and the risk of fraud inherent to increased remote working, and we concluded that the controls have been working effectively. Then looking at materiality and scope. So we used a materiality of 26 million euros, which is primarily based on 5% of annualized interim income before tax with a cap of 26 million euros. And we use this cap because of the fast growth of Adyen, and you don't want to adjust through the year materiality over and over. As all transactions and operations are managed and administered centrally here in Amsterdam, we conducted all our audit work here in the Netherlands and reaching a 100% audit coverage over consolidated revenue, total assets, and the income before tax. Then our key audit matters. Key audit matters are the most important matters we have identified in our work through the year. And we have identified three key audit matters. The first one is the risk of overstatement in revenue recognition. Adyen services operate on a payment service platform. and independent whether payments are submitted online, by mobile, or through point-of-sale terminals, there's one integrated platform on which customers are being served and transactions are being processed. The generated revenue relates to processing fees, settlement fees, and fees for other services in connection to processed volume. Our audit focused on the operational effectiveness of key controls around the revenue processes and this platform, and we concluded that we could rely on these controls. But in addition, we tested on a sample basis the accuracy and completeness of contractual rates and volumes captured in the system. We independently requested and obtained all bank confirmations. We reconciled the recognized revenue in the financial statements to the payment service platform, and we performed data analytics on revenue transaction processes. And furthermore, we performed media scans for, so we call bad news, to identify potential fictitious revenue which we did not notice. Then the second key audit matter is around the IT general controls. The design and operating effectiveness of IT general controls is of significance of Adyen. The financial accounting and reporting of the group are largely dependent on the payment platform, since the most significant line items in the balance sheet and income statement are recorded on this payment platform. So we have, to the extent relevant to the audit, paid specific attentions to the IT dependencies and the IT general controls. And we concluded that the continuity and the reliability of the IT system is monitored by effective controls. And then our last key audit matter, and that's around the valuation and classification of a derivative liability. And this key audit matter relates to the valuation of a merchant contract, the eBay contract. The merchant is entitled to acquire a fixed number of shares in a series of 4 tranches for cash at a specified price per share upon terms and conditions in the contract. And the ability to exercise a warrant is linked to meeting significant milestones with respect to processed volumes on a calendar year basis. And during 2021, the milestone of the first tranche was achieved. And we performed an independent assessment of the key assumptions contributing to the fair value of the derivative liability and found the outcome to be reasonable. Then the last item I would like to address is around our approach towards fraud and going concern. And I would like to do that because of the request of a lot of stakeholders, and you've maybe seen the newspaper today that again, attention is asked by us as auditors on fraud. So we summarized in our report our audit approach towards the risk of fraud and the applied going concern assumption. So we identified as potential fraud risk the risk of management override of controls and the risk of erroneous financial reporting due to overstating revenue. Now, based on the audit work done, as we described in detail also in the key audit matter, we didn't notice any indications of fraud potentially resulting in material misstatements. Furthermore, management prepared the consolidated financial statements on the assumption that the group is a going concern and it will continue its operations for the foreseeable future. And our procedures performed didn't result in outcomes contrary to management's assumptions and judgments. And I realize that it's pretty much all of this language, but I say we concur with management. The annual report was released shortly after the war in Ukraine started. And at the time of releasing the report, we did not identify matters that required specific disclosures in the annual report. Well, thank you very much for your attention. And of course, I'm happy to take any questions related to our audit of these financial statements. But before that, I will hand over now the floor to the chairman.
Okay, thank you, Rogier, for this explanation. I invite you now to submit questions about what Rogier just explained, so anything pertaining the audit process at PwC statement. Are there any questions about this? Okay, Then we will proceed to the next item on the agenda, which is 2B, the remuneration report over the year 21. We would, where we will give an explanation of the remuneration report over the year 21, including the management board and supervisory board's remuneration for the past financial year. This will be given by Joep van Beurden, the chairman of our nomination and remuneration committee. Joep.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning to all. The information and explanation on the remuneration of the Management Board and Supervisory Board in 2021 takes the form of a remuneration report, in Dutch bezoldigingsverslag. We have listed the remuneration report 2021 for a separate advisory vote on the agenda. In accordance with relevant requirements, our external auditors have confirmed that the required information has been included in the remuneration report. This is on top of the information provided in the remuneration report in accordance with the best practice provisions of the Dutch Corporate Governance Code. In the past financial year, the Management Board and the Supervisory Board members have been remunerated in accordance with the 2020 remuneration policy without any deviations. The remuneration report over 2021 has been published on Adyen's website as part of the annual report and will remain accessible for a period of 10 years.
Okay, thank you, Joep, for this explanation. I invite you now to submit any questions about what Joep just explained. So anything about the remuneration report 21? No questions. Then we will proceed to the vote. The general meeting has an advisory vote on this agenda item 2B, following the implementation of the Shareholders Directive number 2 in Dutch law. We will now continue with the advisory vote for 2B, the remuneration report over the year 21. And the proposal is to grant a positive advice to the remuneration report 21. We will now proceed to the vote. So if you can take your voting device. You have been logged on via your mobile phone, tablet. I hope it all works. If you have any technical issues, our colleagues are here to assist you. And the vote is now open. You can vote. And the vote is still open, but can close it now. Yeah, the civil law notary will show the results of the vote immediately. It's already here. So with a percentage of 98.20, there is a majority of votes in favor and therefore positive advice from the general meeting for the remuneration report 2021. Thank you very much. Then agenda item 2C, adoption of the annual accounts. We will now move on to agenda item 2C, the adoption of the annual accounts for the financial year ending 31st December 21. The Management Board, Supervisory Board and PwC have now each presented their report for 21, and the proposal is to adopt the annual accounts for the year ending 31st December 21. And now I invite you to submit any questions you may have on what has been discussed here. No further questions, then we will proceed to the vote. Again, you have been logged on, so you can vote. It's open. The vote, it is now closed. The results will be shown by civil law notary. 99.9% in favor, so there is a majority and the proposal is accordingly adopted. Thank you. Then 2D, dividend policy and reservation of profits. We would like to move to 2D, the company's dividend policy. This is not a voting item. In accordance with the Corporate Governance Code, we will discuss the policy here. And it's very easy. It is the company's policy not to pay a dividend. As stated in the consolidated financial statements of 21 annual report, the Management Board proposes reserving the full profit realized in the financial year 21. I now invite you to submit any questions you may have about dividend. No questions. Then we will proceed to agenda item number 3, which is the discharge of Management Board members for their management activities in the financial year 21. It is proposed to discharge the members of the Management Board, i.e. Pieter van der Does, Ingo Uitenhagen, Roeland Prins, Mariette Zwart, Kamran Zaki and Alexander Matthij from liability in respect of the performance of their management duties to the extent that such performance is apparent from the annual accounts of the financial year 21 or has been otherwise disclosed to the general meeting before the resolution is adopted. We will now proceed to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is now closed. Civil law notary will show the results. 99.17% in favor, so there is a majority and the proposal is accordingly adopted. Then we go to the adoption or the discharge of supervisory board members for their supervisory activities in the financial year 21. It's proposed to discharge the members of the supervisory board in 21. Same as today is myself, Piero Overmars, Delphine Ruede, Joep van Beurden, Pamela Joseph and Kiva Kyogen for liability in respect of the performance of their supervisory duties to the extent that such performance is apparent from the annual accounts for the financial year 21 or has been otherwise disclosed to the general meeting before the resolution is adopted. We will now proceed to the vote. The vote is open. Okay, the poll is now closed. And we have the result immediately. Again, same amount, 19.17% in favor. So majority and proposals accordingly adopted. And for the next item on the agenda, I'd like to give the floor back to Joep van Beurden, the chairman of our Nomination and Remuneration Committee.
Thank you, Piero. Agenda item 5 relates to the proposal to reappoint Pieter van der Does as member of the Management Board with the title Chief Executive Officer. The period for which Pieter is appointed as member of the Management Board with the title Chief Executive Officer ends 13th of June 2022. On this basis, in accordance with the Articles of Association of the company, the Supervisory Board proposes to reappoint Pieter as member of the Management Board with effect from the date of this general meeting for the period of 4 years. Pieter Willem van der Does is a Dutch citizen. Pieter is a leading expert with over 20 years experience in the payments industry. He was CCO at Bibit before co-founding Adyen in 2006. Since then, Adyen has grown from a startup into a global operation, averaging double-digit annual growth since 2007. Pieter has been and is instrumental to the continued growth of the company from its first years of profitability in 2011 through IPO in 2018 and now at a scale of processing over 500 billion euros in volume in 2021. The Supervisory Board proposes to reappoint Pieter as a member of the Management Board of the company with the title Chief Executive Officer in view of his strong people management and leadership skills, as well as his strategic ability to grow the Adyen team and company culture. Furthermore, Pieter has proven to be a key leader at Adyen since its foundation. The proposed reappointment takes the Management Board profile and equal opportunity policy into account, The reappointment does not require the approval of the Dutch Central Bank, the Nederlandse Bank, in this respect. Peter, maybe you want to say a few words about the proposal for your reappointment.
Thank you, Joep. Yeah, I'd like to say a few things. Scaling the Adyen culture, that has always been very high on my priority list. We've built a company, culture first company, where very talented people in their field want to work. That's really inspiring for others to also join this team. And as that's high on my priority list, I spend a lot of time on that, and I think that's key in the further development of this company. Secondly, look at everything we built and how we are now getting to the start of reaping the fruits of that. We are scaling investments that we make around unified commerce. We are scaling our licenses by moving into new regions, by developing new products. And I think it's now key to focus on the execution of this, and I'd love to be part of that. And thirdly, by keeping the bar high, by building a very special team, that's something that I can see around me, and something that I enjoy. Almost every day I love to go to work. So you could also have signed me up for another 10 years, but I take 4.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. And Joep, and I now invite you to submit any questions you may have about Peter's proposed reappointment. If there are no questions, we will now proceed to the vote. The vote is open. You can vote. And the vote is now closed. We will see the results here, 99.54%. So congratulations, Peter.
Thank you.
I'm very happy with that. So majority of votes, and therefore proposal is accordingly adopted. And of course, I say this on behalf of my colleagues in the Supervisory Board, Peter. So for the next item, we will give the floor back to Joep van Beurden for the reappointment of Roeland Prins.
Thank you, Piero. Agenda item 6 relates to the proposal to reappoint Roeland Prins as member of the Management Board. The period for which Roeland is appointed as member of the Management Board with the title Chief Commercial Officer ends on 13th of June 2022. In accordance with the Articles of Association of the company, the Supervisory Board proposes to reappoint Roeland as a member of the Management Board of the company with the title Chief Commercial Officer with effect from the date of this general meeting for the period of 4 years. Roeland Prins is a Dutch citizen. Roeland is responsible for all commercial activities at Adyen. He entered the online payments industry in the early 2000s. Roeland has held various international management roles in sales and business development for companies providing payment solutions to international e-commerce businesses. Having joined Adyen at an early stage, Roeland has served as its CCO since 2009, during which time he has overseen the execution of Adyen's commercial strategy up to the scale that it operates at now. He's a key member of the team that has posted successful commercial results in both a private company and public company setting and across verticals, regions, and products. The Supervisory Board proposes to reappoint Roeland as a member of the Management Board of the company with the title Chief Commercial Officer in view of his strong commercial leadership skills and his ability to successfully build out the commercial organization, resulting in a globally renowned merchant base, which now includes industry leaders such as Microsoft, eBay, and H&M. Furthermore, Roeland has proven to be instrumental to the company's growth over the last 15 years. The proposed reappointment takes the Management Board profile and equal opportunity policy into account. The reappointment does not require the approval of the Dutch Central Bank, the Nederlandse Bank, in this respect. Roland, maybe you also want to say a few words about the proposal for your reappointment.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Joep. Yeah, I've been with Adyen this summer now for almost 15 years, so from the early days, and it's been a fantastic journey to grow the company in a commercial organization where I think we've developed a very specific Adyen way of selling and working, where we give people a lot of autonomy and we focus a lot around teamwork and really finding the best interest for our customers. That we're now in over 20 countries with people working together is a fantastic foundation for further growth. And I'm very enthusiastic about the path ahead of us, especially around enabling platforms and enabling platforms to succeed with embedding payments, broader financial services. And yeah, I'm very enthusiastic about continuing the journey. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joep and Roland. I now invite you to submit any questions you may have about Roland's proposed reappointment. No questions, then we will proceed to the vote. The vote is now open. And the vote is now closed. We will see the results here, 99.52%. Also overwhelming support from the shareholders. Congratulations, Roland. So the proposal is accordingly adopted. Then we will move to agenda item number 7. The general meeting is asked to renew the existing mandate to the management board, whereby the company may issue up to a maximum of 10% of the share capital, subject to approval by the supervisory board. If the mandate is granted, it will be valid for a period of 18 months from the date of this meeting. This is a mandate in line with market condition and is intended to enable the company to issue shares if, for example, this is necessary for the acquisition of additional capital. Without this mandate from the AGM, a separate AGM would have to be convened for this purpose. If the company wants to act quickly, this will be difficult, as the notice period for convenience is 42 days. I now invite you to submit any questions you may have on this subject. No questions, then we will proceed to the vote. The vote is now open. And the vote is closed. So let's see the results, 99.47%. So there is a majority of votes in favor and the proposal is accordingly adopted. Then item number 8, the authority to restrict or exclude preemptive rights. The general meeting is asked to renew the existing mandate to limit or exclude preemptive rights to the management board, subject to approval by the supervisory board. This links up to the previous agenda item. The preemptive rights attached to the shares that are issued under the previous mandate may be limited or excluded. This too is a common provision for many Dutch listed companies. I invite you to ask questions if you have any. Then we will proceed to the vote. The vote is now open. The vote is now closed, and the results will be on the screen. 98.06% in favor, so there is a majority and the proposal is accordingly adopted. Then agenda item number 9, authority to acquire own shares, in which the general meeting is asked to renew the existing mandate to the management board to buy back shares. If the mandate is granted, it will be valid for a period of 18 months from the date of this meeting. In accordance with what is standard market practice, only a maximum of 10% of the number of shares currently issued may be repurchased. The condition is, however, that the company does not hold more than 10% of its own shares and that the price is not less than the nominal value of the shares and not higher than the opening price on Euronext on the day of purchase, plus 10%. I now invite you to submit any questions about this subject. If there are no further questions, we will proceed to the vote. The vote is open. You have, the poll is now closed. We will see the results. 99.5% in favor. There is a majority of votes in favor of the proposal, and it is therefore accordingly adopted. Thank you. Then item number 10, the reappointment of the external auditor. We've come to the last voting item of this meeting. The vote for all previous agenda items will close after the discussion on the agenda. No, that's not correct. This agenda item concerns proposal for the Supervisory Board regarding the recommended reappointment of PwC as external auditor for the current financial year. I now invite you to submit any questions about this proposal. If none, then we will proceed to the vote. Vote is now open. Now closed, and support is 99.86%. That's even higher than for Roland and Peter. So there is a clear majority in favor, and the proposal is accordingly adopted. And that brings us to agenda item number 11, any other business. So any other questions you may have? No further questions. Then I would like to thank you very much for your participation and contribution and support for this general meeting. And we now proceed to the closure of the meeting. We hope to see you next year, again in person, hopefully. And I declare the meeting closed at 13 minutes past 10. Thank you.